Welcome to the Friday Spiritual Checkup for April the 23rd. Well, I hope you've been getting some reading done during this time of isolation and restriction. I hope especially you've had time to read the Bible. I know some of you have been doing some condensed Bible reading plans, and that's very courageous. I would love to hear how that's going. You can put your comment in the comment section on this YouTube channel or email me or comment on Facebook and let us know how that Bible reading plan is going. I've also been reflecting on other books that have been of particular influence on my life in shaping me spiritually over the years. And so I thought it might be interesting to share with you kind of my top 10 books that have influenced me in my spiritual journey. And my hope is that you will share some of your books with me. And again, you can do that in the comment section or on Facebook or by sending me your top 10 email list. Now, a little disclaimer. First of all, we have to narrow the field down a little bit because there's lots of authors and lots of books. So I started to think specifically about Christian authors writing about theological subjects. And so that's my encouragement to you. What Christian authors writing about theological subjects have been an influence and a help to you in your spiritual journey? Now, the other disclaimer is this is my list. So if you don't see your favorite author or your favorite book pop up, then that's not my fault. That's on you. You can share that with me. But this is kind of my personal list. It's not the 10 best books in the world. It's just the ones that are on my shelf that have been of particular interest. So the reality is about 10 years ago, I gave away about 75% of my books to a small Bible college. And I just didn't want to carry them around any longer. But the books that I kept are usually the books that have been most impactful in my spiritual journey. And some of these authors have served as a kind of mentor to me, and I go to them again and again over the years. Well, one of those authors, and this is my top book that has been of influence to me, one of the authors is John Bunyan. And some of you might be familiar with him. John Bunyan was an English author. He was a preacher. He died in 1688. He was just 59 years old. And he had an interesting and somewhat difficult life. You can Google him or go to Wikipedia and find out more information about him. John Bunyan wrote a number of different books. He wrote Holy War. He wrote Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners. But there's one book in particular, and maybe you already know it, one book that set him apart from all the others. And that book is The Pilgrim's Progress. And this is one of the top most influential books in my life, right from the time I was very, very young. Pilgrim's Progress was published in 1678. And I actually picked up this copy when I was living in Edinburgh, Scotland. But really, I first read this book when I was about 8 years old. And for some reason, it just captivated me. I loved the characters. I loved the storyline. There was something deeper about it that kept me going back again and again. I even forced some of my friends to do dramatic scenes based on this book and perform them for my parents and their friends. And I think at least twice, I dressed up as a character from this book for Halloween. I'm sure the people that I visited on the doorstep had no idea who I was when I showed up. And so that's how influential this book has been over the years. Well, this book has been translated into over 200 different languages. It's never been out of print, and it was actually claimed to be the first proper English novel ever. So you can check that out and see if you agree with that assessment. Well, John Bunyan wrote this book while he was in prison. It was published after he was released from prison. But he was in jail because he was a non-conformist, and it got him into a lot of trouble. This is the charge that was laid against him that got him in prison. The charge was that he devilishly and perniciously abstained from coming to church to hear divine service. So apparently you could go to prison for not going to church. Actually, for John Bunyan, he didn't attend his parish church. Instead, he was attending a nonconformist, which means that it wasn't sanctioned by the government kind of church in England, and he got in trouble for it. The offense was punishable by 3 months in prison, but if you didn't repent, you could be banished or executed. So it was a very serious thing. I think John Bunyan spent about 12 years of his life in prison because of his nonconformist attitudes. Well, the book itself is an allegory of the Christian life. And that's what is so fascinating about it. John Bunyan, he says, in a dream I saw this unfolding. And he begins to talk about the main character going from the city of destruction, which is the world, and journeying toward the celestial city, which is heaven. And he has a lot of adventures, meets a lot of people along the way. There's one quote that I'll read from the book, and it just talks about the difficulty and the challenge of facing the Christian life. He says this: "The hill, though high, I covet to ascend. The difficulty will not me offend, for I perceive the way to life lies here. Come, pluck up heart, let's neither faint nor fear. Better, though difficult, the right way to go, than wrong, though easy, where the end is woe." So the book is filled with allegory and imagery and poetry, and it's kind of fascinating. Well, why was this influential? Well, I think it had such an impact on me because it showed me that faith is a journey, and faith is somewhat of an adventure. We have friends and we have foes along the way. We have challenges, we have opportunities. There's a certain imperfection of walking the path. And yet faith is really a long obedience in the same direction. And that's what we find out in Pilgrim's Progress. I think one of the most dramatic scenes, and this is kind of a spoiler alert here, is near the end of the book where they have to cross over the river which represents death. And as they begin to cross over the river, they realize that for some people, crossing the river is very easy. The river is shallow, the waters are calm, and they make it through to the other side with no problem. But for other people, the river is just crazy. It's deep and it's cold and it's hard. And as I've reflected on that in my pastoral ministry, I realize that that's very true. As people cross over that last river, sometimes it's very a difficult journey, sometimes it's a very simple journey. And so that reality also rings true in the book. Well, I want to encourage you to maybe pick up Pilgrim's Progress and read it. There's more accessible versions. There's even a film version you can watch, but nothing beats going back to the original and kind of slogging your way through this. So I want to say thanks to John Bunyan for being one of my mentors and for Pilgrim's Progress being such an influence on me. I encourage you to pick it up and have a chance to read it maybe over this time of isolation. And thanks for checking in for the Spiritual Checkup today.